In this lesson, let's learn about preparing to install a domain controller. First, we will learn how to get the hardware requirements for a domain controller, and then we will prepare the server configurations and Active Directory configuration. After that, we will put everything together to get the final configurations for the domain controller that we will install. And finally, we will sum up the lesson with the keynotes. Determining hardware requirements for the domain controller is a two-step process. First, we need to find the minimum hardware requirements for the Windows Server version from Microsoft website. Next, we need to determine the right hardware configurations of the server based on the real environment, such as the number of users and applications. Here are the minimum hardware requirements for Windows Server 2019 that we get from the Microsoft website. And here are the configurations that we choose for our domain controller. After deciding on the hardware configurations, the next step is to prepare the server configurations, such as the server name, IP address, subnet mask, and the default gateway. A good server name in a real working environment usually includes the following information. The location indicates where the server is located. The best practice is to choose the first three letters of the city name for the location. For example, if the server is in Chicago, then the location is CHI. The environment tells us the use of the server. Here are some popular environments: production for P, development for D, and QA for Q. The hardware type tells us how the server is built. There are two types: physical for N and virtual for V. The function tells us the main function of the server. Use up to three letters. For example, DC for domain controller, DB for database, FS for file server, and the number, which is the order number of the server with the same function starting at 01. For example, this server is located in Chicago, so the name starts with CHI. And it is used for production workload, so the next letter is P. And it is a virtual server, so the next letter is V. And it is the first domain controller, so the last letters are DC01. So we have the server name as GPVDC01. To set the IP address for the domain controller, we need to obtain the IP scheme assigned to the location from the networking department. For example, this is the IP scheme assigned to Chicago. As you can see, the production server is assigned with this subnet, and here is the default gateway for the subnet. So in this subnet, we need to find an open IP address to assign to our domain controller. For example, we assign the IP address for the domain controller is 10.0.0.10. And we know that the /23 subnet mask is 255.255.254.0. And finally, the gateway is 10.0.0.2. The last step in preparing to install a domain controller is to design and document the Active Directory configuration. And here are the Active Directory configuration. The first one is a server OS version, for example, Windows Server 2019. The root domain name, which is required by the domain controllers of parent domains, and the child domain name, which is required by domain controllers of child domains. The roles, at the minimum, we need to install Active Directory domain service and DNS roles for a domain controller, and the installation account, and usually it is administrator. In a real working environment, which Windows Server operating system to install depends on the license that the company purchased. For example, if the company purchased the license for Windows Server 2019 Data Center, then we will install it with the Desktop Experience option, because this option installs the full Windows graphical environment, which make it easier for us to manage and troubleshoot any related issues. Root domain is a required parameter when installing the first domain controller in the forest. For the best practice, root domain should not be existed on the internet. Here is a simple rule to pick a root domain name. Root domain name should contain two parts. The first part use the company name or use the first letter of each word of the company name. For the second part, use .local. With the rule above, Active Life Skills should have the root domain name set as activelifeskills.local. Now we put all the configuration parameters in each step together. We will have the final configuration parameters to install the first domain controller for Active Life Skills in this table, and it is usually called the profile of the server. This is the end of this lesson. Please read the keynotes